The ballroom shimmered under crystal chandeliers, filled with the soft clinking of glasses and a low murmur of conversations. It was the company's annual gala, a night designed for the CEO to flaunt his achievements and remind everyone how fortunate they were to serve under his reign. My husband, David, had never cared much for these events, but tonight he stood beside me in a sharp black suit, composed as always. The CEO, Richard Harlow, was a man who thrived on control. He relished the sound of his own voice and the sight of others shrinking under it. When his gaze landed on David, the quiet husband of one of his department managers, he smiled the way a predator does when it senses an easy target. After finishing his speech, Richard strolled to our table. Resting a heavy hand on David's shoulder, he raised his voice loud enough for nearby guests to catch every word. "So, David," he drawled, "remind me again, what is it you do? Or are you still riding on your wife's paycheck?" Uneasy laughter rippled through the table. The kind people force when they're too afraid to oppose the boss. My stomach nodded. Richard's tone was sharp, crafted to embarrass. He leaned in, grin stretching wider. "Must be nice, huh? Sitting back while she carries all the weight. A real modern arrangement." Heat rushed to my face, but David didn't so much as twitch. He sat steady, holding his glass of water, eyes locked on Richard like the man was nothing more than an irritating insect. The silence dragged on until even the CEO's smirk began to fade. Then David spoke, his voice low, even and cutting to the tension like a blade. "Well, Richard," he said smoothly, "I suppose it is nice. Nice to know I don't need to tear down my spouse just to feel like a man." The entire room froze. Forks hung midair. A hush spread across the tables until every ear was tuned to his words. Richard's grin collapsed, his expression faltering under the weight of attention now aimed at him. David didn't stop, leaning forward slightly. His tone remained calm, deliberate. "You see, a man's worth isn't measured by how loudly he boasts or how many people he can belittle at dinner. It's measured by respect. And from where I sit, you look bankrupt." Gasps escaped the table. Someone tried to disguise a laugh with a cough. Richard opened his mouth, but no words came. For once, the man who always had the last line stood speechless. David set down his glass gently, speaking as though he were offering advice instead of delivering a final blow. "You may run a company, Richard, but leadership isn't about power. It's about dignity. And tonight, you've shown none." The silence that followed was thick, almost electric. Around the room, people avoided Richard's eyes, their loyalty cracking as David's words replayed in their minds. The insult Richard meant for my husband had turned back on him with devastating force. At last, Richard forced a laugh, brittle and hollow. Well, only joking, of course." David tilted his head, calm as ever. "Yes," he replied softly, "but some jokes reveal more truth than you'd like." He leaned back in his chair, completely at ease, as though the exchange had been nothing more than small talk about the weather. Red-faced and trembling, Richard muttered something about checking on the catering before stumbling away, leaving whispers trailing in his wake. For the rest of the evening, people looked at David differently, not as a quiet husband who blended into the background, but as the man who had silenced the most powerful voice in the room with nothing but steady truth. Later, as we drove home, I reached for his hand. "Do you realize what you did back there?" I asked, adrenaline still coursing through me. David smiled faintly, eyes fixed on the road. "I didn't do anything extraordinary. I just refused to let a small man make me smaller. And that night, I learned something important. Respect doesn't come from titles or wealth or power. It comes from the strength to stay calm when others try to break you." Richard had attempted to humiliate my husband in front of everyone, but it was David's composed reply that left not only the CEO in silence, but the entire room remembering who the real man truly was.